what your take would be on, we have this very old saying here in Greece, which was engraved on the Temple of Apollo in Delphi, which says, know thyself.
Yeah.
What would that mean to someone like you?
Well, I think Socrates said that the unexamined life is not worth living, and I think what that means is that it's interesting. So that said that on the Temple of Apollo, know thyself. In the Jewish Bible, God tells Abraham to go to yourself. To go to yourself. So there's something about the self that's important for human beings to know. But both the sign at Delphi and also the Abrahamic call to go to yourself implies that we're not automatically in touch with ourselves. We're not automatically aware of who we are and what our needs are and what our truth is. So there's something about human life that gets in the way of self-awareness. And what that is, I think, is the trauma of living in a world that doesn't know how to see and recognize and understand the infant and the young child. So we don't get to see and understand and respect ourselves. And that creates all kinds of problems. And from my point of view as a physician, it creates all kinds of health problems.
Yeah.
So that both psychological and spiritual and physical health requires then for us to come to ourselves, to get to know ourselves. On a very basic level, it means knowing what you feel and being able to act on what you feel. Now, let's give a simple example. Out there, human beings evolved out there in nature. We didn't evolve living in cities or towns or farms. We evolved out there in nature. For millions of years, that's where we lived. Yeah. And for most of the existence of our species, even our present species, Homo sapiens, we lived in a small band, hunter-gatherers out there in the wild. Now, if out there you didn't know what you felt, what your gut feelings told you, how long would you survive? So that knowing ourselves on a strict level of just what are our emotions, when do I have fear?
Yeah.
When do I have excitement? When do I have desire? When do I have anger? If I'm not in touch with those, I don't survive.
Mm-hmm.
So on a very basic level, that's what it means. Just know what's...
the emotion.
Know the emotions, but another, that means being in touch with our bodies, because our emotions happen in our bodies.
Yeah.
Now, you can talk about knowing yourself on a spiritual level, knowing yourself as connected to all reality and all that, but on a very basic level, it begins with just being in touch with our bodies.
Yes, that's really crucial for me, because as a body psychotherapist, we notice very often how people, when they talk about themselves, it's as if they're talking just from the brain. There's no connection to the fact that there's an emotion and there's a body.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I found fascinating in your book, because you are so much in the body and in the emotion.
Well, and that's the thing. So nobody's born like that. Most of us, unless something happens in pregnancy, most of us are born in touch with our bodies.
Yeah.
The infant knows, and then they don't hide it.
Yeah.
So something happens to us to disconnect us from our bodies.
Yeah.
And that disconnection is the source of much pathology, physical pathology. So it's a question of either waking up to getting connected to ourselves or getting sick, and then maybe the disease comes along to teach us something. I don't recommend that way of learning.
Yeah.
It's not a way I want people to learn. But on the other hand, I know many people who actually did do that learning through an illness. They got sick and they realized how out of touch they were, and afterwards they were even grateful for the illness. Again, I don't recommend that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that's how it works.
So you mean, in a way, what you're saying is that maybe an illness can eventually get you, maybe, to know thyself.
Oh, I've seen that many, many times. And even when I used to work in palliative care, looking after dying people,
Yeah.
some of them would say, again, I don't recommend this. I don't know that I could do this myself. I'm just telling you what I've experienced and witnessed, that even sometimes people near death will say, I'm grateful for this cancer because it woke me up to myself, and that's a precious gift. Now, I would never say that to somebody else, that you should be grateful for your cancer. But I'm just telling you what people have told me. And I've seen many examples of actually people who are very, very sick, and sometimes even they've been told that they're going to die, and then they get to know themselves, and they actually get better. Now, again, I'm not saying this is a cure and that anybody should go for that. I'm just telling you what I've observed. So it can work like that. The disease can be in my new book, The Myth of Normal, which I think will also be published in Greece. I believe it will be.
What's the title again? Sorry.
The book is called The Myth of Normal.
Wow.
Trauma, Illness, and Healing in a Toxic Culture. And I have a chapter called The Diseases Teacher, and just what people have learned about themselves through being sick.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you see it too.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And that's what makes your take interesting. Another thing for me was how you perceive that we are, as a culture, addicted to stress.
Mm-hmm. So I spent my first year in Budapest as a Jewish infant under the Nazis, and it was wartime, and Budapest was being, apart from the threat to myself and my mother from the Nazis, which was a genuine, horrifying threat, as you know, but there was also the bombing of the city by the Allies, so that air raid sirens, and running to the bomb shelters, and being thrown into a basket and being carried down to the basement. Later on, I always found myself very comfortable in situations of stress, but when I was doing nothing and at rest, I was very uncomfortable. I didn't know what to do with myself.
Yes. Yeah.
So then I kept choosing situations of stress. And if you want to choose situations of stress, go to medical school. You got.
Yeah. Yes. So choosing, or maybe even creating them.
Well, choosing them not consciously.
Yes.
But creating them and creating them and gravitating towards them.
Yes. And Gabor, how did you manage to get out of that cycle?
Well, getting out of that cycle is a lifelong challenge for me. And as a matter of fact, some years ago, my wife said to me, not that long ago, my wife said to me, "You've written a book called When the Body Says No. No, you should write one called When the Wife Says No," because
yes.
So it's a work in progress. Let me put it that way.
So have you found ways in which you can alleviate stress, or what exactly have you done with stress? Have you treated it for yourself as an addiction?
Yes, I really have. So for me, it shows up through work, and it's not a question of alleviating it. It's a question of not creating it, and it's a question of It's a question of getting to know yourself so that you're comfortable with yourself as you are without having to add something now, you know. So people in this society always talk about stress reduction and so on. Ideally, it's not a question of stress reduction. It's a question of how do I live a life that, I mean, life brings its own stresses. And in my new book, for example, I talk about when there was the economic crisis in Greece. They looked at the hormone levels of young Greek university-age kids. They found actually that they had abnormal stress hormone levels. In fact, some of them had lower than normal stress hormone levels, which means that their stress system had been exhausted. Now, that's a socially created condition. Those Greek young people did not create the economic punishment that Greece was subjected to in the European system. And you know that history better than I do. So some of those stresses, they're external and they just happen to us. But then there's a lot of stuff that we create for ourselves unwittingly. And a big way that we create stress for ourselves is by not saying no.